Welcome everyone, and I'm going to pass to Marissa.
Hello, everyone. Greetings from now, Florida. Woo! Just being on. So grateful to see you all. I actually won't spend too much time because I know we want to respect time and want to get into the groups. But no, today, like last week, we talked a lot about tactics and targets. So we're kind of gonna go pivot back to goals. And as you all remember, the goals are so important to have clear ones, to have ones that and that and I mentioned in the smaller groups when we had it, like the clearer the goals are and the specific they are, that help inform your tactics and your targets really well. So just to remember that. So we're going to spend a lot of time in groups today and talking about that and develop outer goals. One thing I also want to say too is there are folks who know exactly what they want, which is amazing, and that's fantastic too. And there's folks who are still thinking about it. So I encourage you in groups to help each other and think through things, and it's okay to know exactly what you want, and it's okay to be still figuring it out. And we're all at different levels of understanding and engagement and education, and there's no shame in that. So I just want to remember that. And especially for folks who know exactly what they want, this is also a time to fine tune and also get the ideas of folks in the groups with you that you might not have thought or you might not have considered. So I just want to just be open to that with each other and be kind to each other. You all are. Like, this is a great group. I don't have to worry about that. But just as we're thinking about how to best support each other in our different goals and campaigns across the country. So that's all I really have to say. I don't know if there's anything else other folks want to add, but I think we should, jump into the goals.
All right. So Mona or Christine, as I'm assigning the breakout groups, would either one of you mind explaining the process when we get into our rooms?
Sure. Do you want me to talk a little bit about what is a goal before we get there?
What we're going to specifically do when we get into our groups?
Okay. So part of the group talk, the group work today is to really help figure out and hone in on what your goals might be. So we're going to basically start, you all are asked to bring an object that potentially reminded you about the work that you want to do. So we're going to start out doing some sharing to get us a chance just talking about our issues. We've got a couple of prompt questions that we're going to lead into there and have you do some journaling, whether it's on paper or on computer. And then we'll have an opportunity to talk as a group and basically do a little bit of workshopping on what your goals are. So if you have proposed goals, it'll be a great time to bring them to the group and ask questions. Before we get into the breakouts, I will just say that, the goal is basically the thing that you want to do. It might be the thing that you want to do in the next 6 months, or it might be the thing that you want to do in the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And so it's important when you're thinking about your goal, is this what we're trying to work on for the next 6 months, for the next year? Or is this something that we're working on for the longer term? And the longer term the goal is, then you'll see additional breakdowns. Because say your goal is 10 years, you're still going to want to think about what are you trying to do? What do you have to do in the next 6 months or the next year to start getting yourselves to that goal? Are there questions about that?
All right. So I kind of have the broken up. Not everyone sending what their issue is. Most of you did. Some of you might not be an exact fit, but again, it's the core of the conversation is what's going to matter, right? How we're thinking about this, how we're fine tuning long-term, short-term, everything Mona just said. I'm going to be able to pop in and out to just to watch and listen to different groups. So we're going to go into our groups now. But this is your time, folks. Really, if you have something that's kind of brewing in your head, you have really great organizers here to help you fine tune those. All right. So even if the issues we've broken it down to education, health, political participation, and still deciding. So I know, German, yours is information, so it didn't quite fit. And Aqua, there's an environmental piece to yours, doesn't quite fit, but most of you should be in a place that that fits directly, but again, it's the overall conversation. Sarah with women's rights as well. I put you with political participation because there's an element there. All right, so here we go. Into our groups, yay. Right, some people are not in groups yet, sorry. I think everyone's back. So, wow. I mean, I feel so fortunate to being able to drop into the different groups because there's some really amazing work going on. Really, really really amazing. So awesome. So we're going to move to reports out. I'm going to pass on to Christine to take it from here. Oh.
So quick question, did we have certain numbers for the breakout rooms that I could refer to, or how do you want?
Sure. So we had education, we had political participation, we had health, and then we had still deciding, still fine tuning.
Okay.
Thank you.
Got it. So first of all, thank you everyone for participating. I know that I had a great conversation in my group, and from Karen's popping in and out, and she's glowing. I think she really got to sit in and hear some amazing things. What I want to do now is just give everyone kind of a quick opportunity to report back about what what you want to share. Is it your goal that you want to share, and kind of some of the things that you discussed in your group on, how do you know you're getting there? How are you getting the traction? Or is it something else that someone else said that interested you, and you might want to say like, hey, XYZ from the group talked about this, and I thought it was very impressive or helpful. So if anyone's willing to share from their group, we would love for you to just, take the lead and share what you'd like to share. What I will do though is kind of throw out the break room. So hopefully we can get someone to kind of talk a little bit about the goals. I'm debating, should I throw my group in first? Are they going to side-eye me for throwing education first? But since we have a group of leaders here, I want to maybe lay the floor down with bias to my education group. We had some really good goals and some focus, and want to fall back and see if anyone from the education group wants to talk a little bit about the goals and maybe some of the ideas of how do I know when I'm getting traction, when I'm getting there, what to look for, what does change look like for me.
I can go. This is Michaela.
Awesome. Thanks, Michaela.
So mine's a little bit more easier to track change. So I'm guessing that's probably why I was one of the first ones to volunteer. So right now I'm a emerging leaders fellow, and sorry guys, I have my camera off because I am currently living in Vienna, Austria. I'm an intern with one of the UN system organizations, and the Wi-Fi here, I share it with 2 other people temporarily, so it's just not that great. So anyways, yeah, so I'm an Emerging Leaders Fellow right now with the United Nations Association of the US. They have chapters in all of the cities, the major cities in the United States. And the point is for youth to learn more about careers with the United Nations, either, post-grad when you're not doing Model UN, or just as a way for professional development. So I'm working on having a UN Day event, an educational event in the North Carolina area, hopefully in either October or November. And so a way to kind of track the changes by seeing either more Model U or more United Nations clubs within the high schools in that region. And then also, I was saying,
Michaela, you might have hit mute by accident.
oh, sorry. If youth in that area are more interested in the UN, if there's more conversations, whether it's social media, just talking to them, engaging them, talking to high schoolers, more about the international world and what is the UN and what are the sustainable goals. So it's a lot easier to track, I think. But yeah, so we're hoping to get some more UN clubs. So if anyone is from North Carolina, please talk to me, because that is the region I'm assigned and we're working on right now. So yeah.
Thank you, Michaela. Is there anyone else from the education group that might want to volunteer to share? Okay, I'm not going to push you. I might come back though and use an example, but we have the political team, the political group. I'm interested in kind of seeing what was shared in that group. Is there anyone willing to talk about what was discussed in the group and some goals and how, how you might notice that you're actually getting traction and reaching that goal?
I can go. I was in the political group, and we talked a lot about, well, there's 4 people in my group, and we talked about women's rights, voter suppression. I'm doing inclusion in school, and the last person did like police training for non-bias. And my group, like my topic was about finding inclusion for Black students at my school. And I wanted to talk about including affinity groups at my school, and also, let's see, including less of a Eurocentric curriculum, because a lot of the history class is more European based. So I want more of a global perspective. And the harder part for me was finding when I was actually making traction, when I was actually making change in the school.
And yeah, I think one thing that you brought up, I thought that was really important is, in the question around how do you know you're making change, you actually brought up, trying to figure out, how to know the impact of the work, and are Black students and students of color feeling comfortable or seeing that there are safe spaces for them. And I thought that was a really important point to think about when you are trying to identify, like, how do you know change is happening, and that the answer that you're seeking isn't necessarily from your own perspective. And so how do you, who do you need to talk to? Who do you need to bring in to figure out like how to measure that impact?
I think that goes into a great thing of data. And I think I might end up throwing one of my guys, Jack, who had a huge goal of, closing the achievement gap in the education system, right? And us trying to figure out like, how can you hone in, one, to be a little bit more focused because it's a big goal, but also like, how will you know that there's something happening, that you're making an impact? So Jack came back and he was like, I can focus more in my hometown. That's a good way to start your focus. But how are you going to know? And he talked about doing an annual report where he can collect data and get information so that he can go back. So I think that's always important when you're trying to see, am I getting somewhere? Is all this work that I'm doing, am I having an impact? Am I making some sort of progress? So I just wanted to throw that out because I thought it was a really good example. And Jack probably didn't want to say it, but I got you, Jack.
We had a similar conversation with Ryan's project around cultural bias training for police, and wanting, one of the things that they brought up is, how do you know you're making change is, what is the data around police stops after these trainings? How do we know? Which really also pointed to this sort of long-term, but Ryan, feel free to add in if I'm getting some things wrong, but that definitely connected to that data point, Chris.
For sure. All right, Ryan, if you don't have anything to add to that, I actually want to jump in and hear from folks who are part of our health group, to see if anyone's willing. Well, first of all, is there anyone from the political team, from the political group also wanting to share? The floor is definitely open. We don't just have to take one. Okay. And let me know if something comes across and you do want to say something. But if not, let's throw it to the health team, the health group. Do we have anyone willing to kind of share?
I can share if you don't mind.
Awesome. Jose, go ahead. You got the floor.
All right. So in my group, we talked about incarceration, LGBTQ plus rights, and then Black Lives Matter. And my topic was healthcare. No, not sorry. Mental health care. So for my goals, basically, were to end the stigma of mental health and normalize getting mental health support, and to establish mental health as a human right in this country for every single person. Because I said in my group that Mental health is something that doesn't just branch into just people. It branches into every single other issue that everyone is talking about, And if we don't have the support for young people and just adults and people in general, we're never going to be able to grow as a country. And my 2 long-term would be to create a nonprofit and to achieve universal mental health care for everybody. And change would look like, I think, for everybody would be petitions, if people rising up and signing these petitions. And I think one thing that me and my group all had in common would be getting people more educated, because when you can get people more educated, you're going to fire them up, you're going to give them passion, and they're going to want to be more involved, and they're going to want to become more conscious citizens who truly actually care for others, and want to fight for a country that is actually truly united. And also for mental health, I think change would look like schools having more access, communities, especially low-income communities, having more access, and possibly like more nonprofits and stuff. I think progress will be shown through political leaders that are going to step up for us and actually hear us out and fight for what we're doing. So for me, Joe Kennedy III, he's running for Senate in Massachusetts. He's definitely the one that actually understands mental health, and he's someone who is standing up and making plans to expand the access to mental health for people. So, and I think it'll be shown through the people as well, because if people are given this mental health support that they need, they're going to become more fulfilled people in their lives, and they're going to be happier. And I think it'll be a big step for us, for everybody. And yeah, I think the mental health would also be shown the progress through all the other issues as well. So with gun control, incarceration, all the other issues.
Yeah.
That's what I have to share.
No, awesome. Thank you. That's actually a lot of information, Jose. And gosh, Mona, I'm gonna have to throw up something here. There's a big piece with the mental health, like even in the work that we do in organizing, that in the stigma is so relevant into the work, and it's still work that needs to continue going on. I know, Mona, I feel like I want to refer to when we're doing the death penalty work, it's one of those things where it's like this love-hate relationship with mental health, right? Because with our mental health allies and partners who support, obviously, not sentencing someone to death because of a mental illness that they may have. But a lot of the times it has been in the past a lot easier just to say, oh, people have mental health problems, and so let's not kill people because people have mental health problems. And actually our allies in the mental health community started pushing back on us about, listen, it's the way you guys are putting mental health out there. We need to do a better job of that, instead of always making it seem like only the bad people or the so-called crazy people are out there, mental health, and are on death row. So Mona, I wanted to give you a second to highlight or maybe mention something and I wanted to tie that back with what you said, only because, Jose, only to let you know that it's so important when you're talking about mental health on the front end that there's a real understanding of what that is, what the definition is, and how people see it. So as you go out there, you're doing outreach and you're educating people understand from a beginning standpoint of what really, what is the real definition of mental health and how does it connect to the work you're trying to do, the education you're trying to put out there. But Mona, let me fall back a little bit if you wanted to say something about that.
I mean, I actually was keying on something different, and I think you're totally right, Chris. But one of the other thing that I also wanted to note, and just seeing, as Marissa talked about, seeing a lot of similarities, is that this idea of intersectionality, and that the work that you all are doing on your projects doesn't just exist in its own little silo. Work around cultural bias and policing, work around different pieces of education, that connects to other work across the table. And so as you are able to connect to other folks who are doing, even if it's similar work or seeing threads, when we talk about, dismantling white supremacy or, fighting against anti-Blackness, like those threads fall across all the work that we're doing. So I think it's also good to think about what are the intersections of your work, from the perspective of being able to work together, both to move your issue forward and to move the other social change work forward.
For sure.
I just wanted to add something. I just want to applaud the health group, especially around mental health, around taking this approach. One, I come from a community where people don't talk about their mental health, and I get angry when someone's like, just normalize talking about it. No, how can we normalize talking about it if it's not affordable or it's accessible? So I like, and I would urge the approach to be around accessibility and affordability, because we can't keep demanding communities and telling them and preaching to them, normalize it, talk about it. And inadvertently, when you're asking community to talk about it, then they don't have the right support systems that's not affordable or accessible once it's out there. So it's a good place to pause and think about unintended consequences. If you know, it's thinking about your angle and tactics. Is your tactics more going to be around the sort of societal contracts and like relationships around talking about mental health, or is it more on the end of ensuring accessibility and affordability is tackled first before asking specifically vulnerable, marginalized communities to talk about it in lieu of the accessibility? So just something to think about as you're approaching this topic.
Yeah, and I think that also speaks to the importance of, you know, who is centered in the work. And, you know, at EJUSA, for us, like, those who are most impacted should be centered in the work and should have a full seat at the table. So as you're thinking about your goals and as you're thinking about your work, you should constantly be asking yourself the question of who is missing at this table, who is the most impacted, and to make sure that your work is really centering those who are most impacted by the change you're trying to make.
Exactly. I could give it oh, Karen, did you want to say something?
I just want to, I don't think we can emphasize that enough, that it's not just being at the table, that they're centered, right? Because I think there's a history of this work where people are at the table, but their voices aren't heard. They're not there. They're not at the center of it. So it's not enough just to be at the table. It needs to be centered. I think that's such a critical point of how we all move forward with this work. So I just felt the need to emphasize, because I think we've all been at a lot of tables with a lot of people, and it wasn't what we want.
Definitely, inclusion is so important. I'll speak to Yaneris. She talked about getting more women involved in STEM. You know, she walks into her office space or, you know, classes, and it's like 3-4 girls or women, and the rest is full of men in the class. And, you know, so it's one of those things, Yaneris, when you're thinking about like, how can I, you know, Yaneris's goal is to have more women involved in the STEM process, or see more women within the STEM community and profession. And so making sure that when you start thinking through, like, what are some of the things that I want to do, that you make sure that you're reaching out and actually talking to women. Why aren't you here? What, you know, what's missing? What's important? What is it that you want, you know, that you want to see here, or what is it that you're not seeing here before you start anything? Make sure you do your research. Know who are your allies, know who you need at the table, and have inclusion, have conversations to make sure that when you're going out there, we always have these good intentions of wanting to go save the world and wanting to do right. And sometimes our good intentions, we can walk in blindly and realize that we're forgetting people, and we're forgetting the voices of those that need to be there. So just make sure that we do that work on the front end as you continue to kind of focus on what your goals are. I just want to, does anyone have anything else that they'd like to say, something that they want to highlight, something that they learned and thought it was important?
I just wanted to say like one thing with like also the thing talking about with like Yaneris and like increasing like women in STEM. She brought up like a really cool point, which was to get, I think she said, like you said again, like 20 to 80%, like the ratio between like women and men is like 20 to 80 in her school. And instead of like having like the big goal of like 50-50, she just said like, I want to see in the next year like 21, you know, and having that kind of be like incremental. And like that wasn't really something I'd ever thought about, because I was like, oh well, obviously you want 50-50, you know, like the next 2 years, but like that's also like very unrealistic. So I thought that was a very cool like way to look at it.
Definitely, that was great. Yaneris, I know you're kind of quiet, but we're riding out with what you've taught us. So thank you for your engagement in our group and everything that you've added. I wasn't able to have the pleasure of bouncing around like Karen and getting to kind of sneak in some of these amazing conversations. But I tell you, the group that I was with, you guys, you blow me away. passionate, focused, really engaged. Thank you for the opportunity to lead out the breakout room with you. Thank you all for being involved. I'm going to kind of pass it along to my colleague, Karen, pull me back if I'm wrong here, to help us to kind of talk a little bit about homework and for next week. But thank you all so much. And if there's anything Mona, you want to touch up on wrapping up, feel free to lead with that.
Go for it, Karen.
Yeah, guys, I feel so fortunate. I know people are going to have to start jumping off, but remember, some of us will stay till 3:30 for anyone that wants to continue a conversation. But this is why we did this, right? And we're so fortunate to have Marissa and Mona and Christine helping us out, bringing this real experience that's current and in the field and just awesome. And jumping among the groups was really brilliant. And I would emphasize Marissa's point earlier in the chat and what Mona mentioned as well. Check each other out. Find time if you can. I know you're busy. I know there's a lot going on, but try to follow up with each other offline. I mean, I've had the good opportunity or the fortunate opportunity to talk to a few, but find each other off these calls, particularly as you're kind of thinking more and more about kind of how you're developing out your plan. If you still have questions, if there's, Amber, I was listening to you talk about like the ideas there, but it's like you're still working on it. Like connect with each other, because you guys are really pretty awesome. And it's exciting to see you and hear you develop your ideas and your plans. Next week, we will be diving into what so many people have talked about, impact. Like, how do we know impact? Adnan will play a lead role there, and we'll send some stuff out, probably not today, not right now, but we'll get that out to you early so you'll have time to do your homework. And know that office hours are available anytime you want. And I'm just gonna open the floor. You all make me so happy. And I'm gonna say it again because he's still on my mind. Good troublemakers, really good troublemakers. So I'm just gonna open up to any other conversations. Know that I'll be sending a follow-up with work for next week and anything else that's brewing. But any other last thoughts or reflection from any of the facilitators, SGP family, any of you, any questions? It's our time now.
I think there are some groups or people that didn't get to share. So if you want to hang on and share the conversations you had, we can share that too.
I heard something about unions. That's always fascinating. I love our union brothers and sisters.
Well, I'd like to share. I was in the health group, so I was with Jose and so I really like resonated with what Jose said about like mental health, because mental health was a big thing for me. I don't know how it kind of like slipped through my mind when there's so much to focus on and so much like you are passionate about. I don't know how it just like slipped out of my head. Because it's so important, and I've done so much like work on it. I did like this like persuasive like slideshow project for like an English class about how like veterans are impacted by mental health stigma, and like that is something that they have to deal with. And there are a lot of like it was like why you shouldn't join the army, and it's like how veterans are impacted by all the things like mental health and like homelessness and stuff like that. And then I think I did a research project about like how adolescents are impacted by their own parents' mental health stigma, and how they're less likely to get help because their parents have mental health stigma. And it's so like deeply rooted. It's such a deeply rooted societal issue that it's just, I don't know how it just is like almost glazed over, because it's so like it's obvious that it's there, but I don't know how there are very few people like talking about it. Like even in my school, I go to the same school as Yanni, but in our school,
you won't see this talked about. Like, you will have to find like some secret like black corner kind of like club in the school to like see people talking about their own mental health struggles. And that is so weird and so beyond me that it's so foreign to so many people. And that entirely ties into like my issues, like the ones that I was talking about LGBTQ plus rights, and I was talking about rights for like inequality, like the rights for minorities and especially Black people. And mental health stigmas are so deeply rooted in both of those groups that it is absolutely insane, and it almost like baffles me how I just didn't take that into account. So I really do thank you, Jose, because that is something that is very important. And yeah, I just wanted to share that.
And Amber, I'm so glad you said that, because as you were talking, like, even though you didn't explicitly say it in our group, like, I heard it. Like, you were talking about, like, again, what happens when people's history is erased, and like what happens, that is also a mental health issue in terms of what happens to people when they need to be like processes and spaces for healing when like looking at these kinds of oppression. So I did hear an education piece to everything you said, and much needed education, but along that I also heard like what you said about mental health. So even though you felt like you didn't say it, I heard it. So thank you for sharing that.
I mean, in the entire health group, which I was part of as well, I feel like because, you know, the issue is health, mental health can really tie into, you know, not only things in the health group, but into a lot of different social issues. For example, my issue, which was about youth incarceration, dealing with substance abuse, you know, the whole reason that a lot of the reason that even happens, that substance abuse happens among youth, is because of mental health issues, and because mental health help is stigmatized, and because, you know, we're not offering enough aid to people who feel that they have to turn to these type of things. And then on the other side of it, after people have been incarcerated for these types of things, these nonviolent substance offenses, there's trauma on these populations that have, you know, this culture of incarceration for these offenses that, you know, maybe did not warrant them being sent to these harsh correctional facilities. And, you know, there's trauma for the individuals, there's intergenerational trauma, and all of that really ties back into the mental health. So that's very interesting to me, at least.
And I think also not just mental health, but I think this bigger issue of not just individual healing across generations, but also community healing. And I think there's so much there, and you know, how do we think about trauma and healing from trauma as a community? So I think, you know, this work around mental health is so important and critical, that it's great that some of you are doing some work in this sphere.
And just if I'm just gonna put a plug for Gabo. So we work with one of our Speak to Power human rights defenders. Mental health is his issue. So if you go to our website and check out our defenders, just learn a bit about his story. You know, part of what we do at Speak to Power is use the stories of human rights defenders to kind of open this space, right? To provide windows and mirrors into learning about human rights through personal narrative, personal stories. So check him out if you're so inclined. But
and sorry, I think someone was talking about labor unions. I just was wondering, this is Michaela, who that was, and just to learn a little bit more. I don't think I was in that breakout group.
Yeah, it was actually, I'm still kind of refining what I want to do with it, just because it's kind of like a big scope issue. But I kind of want to focus more organizing around like organizing workers into labor unions rather than working out the kinks that are associated with already existing labor unions. But yeah, if anyone has any ideas on like how to narrow down an issue like that, I'd love to hear it.
What city are you located in?
I'm in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, actually.
Oh, is this Graham?
No, I'm in the same house as Graham, though.
Oh, David. Okay. If you want to connect also, North Carolina is where I'm doing the United Nations Association UN Day.
Okay.
So if you want to connect offline, you should look in DC. That's why I was asking for what city. I mean, I'm a little biased because I lived in DC, so I was just more exposed to it. But they had a lot of nonprofit groups, you know, just helping with labor unions and kind of like pro bono advocates. I was a legal aid. I was a pro bono legal aid for an organization called Bread for the City. And so they provide pro bono employment consultants. Karen, I don't know if you're familiar with it in the DC area.
Very much.
Yeah. David, if you want to connect by email or LinkedIn, we could chat more.
Yeah, definitely. Let's do it.
Okay.
Anything else folks want to address? Aqua, how are you coming with yours? You've got a pretty big one that's seeped in a long history as well. Do you want to share a little bit?
Yeah, so sorry. My issue is nuclear abolition and like the education surrounding that, like specifically in like high schools, since like I am in high school. But like something like right now, like I just kind of realized, and also kind of just like considering this from this talk that I had, I was in the education group, is that, I mean, the 75th anniversary is coming up in 10 days of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So like that's kind of something that if like to one goal would be to like increase awareness of that as something like to be like, oh, what happened this day, you know, 75 years ago, so that people can maybe be more interested in the topic since it is something that does potentially affect all of us. And then kind of looking ahead, like in 25 years, it's going to be the 100th anniversary. So kind of just like having that maybe as a goal too, like for increased awareness about it.
Aqua, have you connected with Beyond the Bomb?
I haven't, no.
A friend of mine works there. I'm happy to do an email intro if that would be useful.
Yeah, thank you.
Karen, do you want to send me Aqua's email and email address? And
I'll do
an intro.
I'll intro you too, and then And Aqua, the good thing, I mean, the Quakers have a long history. Aqua also has a really awesome three-pointer. She's a really good basketball player. But the Quakers have a long history in this area as well. So I don't know if the school is picking up anything or doing anything, but.
Yeah, like, like, are you asking, sorry, sorry, what was?
No, I was just saying that you're a great basketball player. And I just am not sure if the Aqua goes to the school my daughter's just graduated from, as does Zoel. And Sarah, who is gone. I just wasn't sure if the school was doing anything because it seems like it's part of Quaker activism, a pretty long, rich tradition. So.
Yeah, like, I mean, I can just like say like a couple, like two things. I think that like one thing we had, like the reason I'm like actually interested in this is that we had as one of our service trip options was to go to Japan and like on the peace tour to learn about it with the director of nuclear studies at American University. So that's kind of like one thing that they're doing, like creating this trip as an opportunity to like learn more about it. But then also we just also created, some people from the trip and I just created a club to kind of like introduce this topic and to people who were unable to go because you can only choose one service trip to go on, and like people who don't go on, like just to increase awareness about this. So like I think like those are kind of like two small things that like we started doing.
We're all just basking in the beauty of each other and the power and the strength and the awesomeness of everyone on this call.
I just want to say thank you to everything everyone says because it really just fires me up about what I'm passionate about more. So hearing everyone else bringing up different issues, it just really, really inspires me even more to actually stay in this fight and put change into play. So I appreciate you guys.
Did we hear anything from the fine tuning, or was that Karen? Did I write it? My notes
No,
scribbled it.
that's David and
Okay,
Graham.
okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we touched it. Yeah.
Got it.
I think Graham hopped off then. We just heard from David. So.
Okay. Just making sure we touched all bases. Thank you.
But if for folks who are curious, Graham's is more around, his issue is around social media and it being better regulated to protect things like election interference, hate speech, ultimately to how do you use and regulate social media in a way to properly protect democracy. So just a light subject.
I know.
Karen, do you know Susan Benesh, right? She's doing a lot of work on hate speech online and could be a useful resource for Graham.
Okay.
Well, there's Graham now.
There he is.
What's up?
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great idea, Mona.
We were just wanting to hear more about your issue area and where you're at and trying to fine tune your issue.
Oh, yeah. No, what you said, Adnan, earlier about like, you know, getting like the end goal, putting it on like the very far right side of the page and working backwards. I think that was really helpful because like y'all were discussing earlier, it can get so overwhelming to when you're like passionate about an issue to be going down all these different paths and saying, okay, well, I want to do this, but I also want to do this, and really just honing in and focusing on one particular area and then moving from that. So it was really helpful.
And that's something for a lot of folks to think about when you're thinking about your goals, which I'll talk about next week. But really the importance of thinking about interim benchmarks to your overarching end goal, because, you know, the issues that you're talking about, the reality is it's a long-term commitment. And the kinds of outcomes that you're wanting to see aren't going to be readily available in real time very soon. This is, you know, the issues you're talking about are hefty things that have a lot of complexity and a lot of network building, base building, you name it. And to make it a little bit more achievable is to think about those interim benchmarks. And I use the metaphor of like, what are the signposts? If you're on the road, what are the signs that are letting you know you're going in the right direction or not? And how load bearing, how foundational and strong are those pieces of evidence? Not necessarily proof, but how strong are those pieces of evidence that you're going in the right way? And to really think about your short-term goals to get to your long-term goals, because some of your goals, especially your interim goals, are going to change a lot. I mean, this is a iterative process, because the other thing I'll talk about is that this isn't a pass or fail thing, right? This journey isn't a pass or fail. It's organizing is inherently a learning journey, right? And so I think that's one thing that's helpful for all of you to know, is that if you go in it with the mentality of like, man, I failed or I didn't succeed in this strategy or this tactic is going to be very emotionally tolling, but really look at it as welcome some failures as a learning moment, and really look at it as one of the core components of it is learning and not a pass or fail. So but we'll dive more into that next week.
Yeah, and as it relates to the pass or fail, you know, I think the cool thing about organizing and kind of doing what we do is reassessing. You know, when you kind of go through and what have we reached, how close are we to our goals. And as you move forward, things do change. You know, tactics have to change. Just the target may change. And so it's so important to always make sure that you kind of go back and reassess and see where you're at, because the vision may change as well. So I'm looking forward, Anand, to hear what you have next week.
Absolutely.
And just a reminder, the very last session, folks, is kind of what we just did, but more. So it's the last session is you, and it's going to be about you sharing with us kind of your plan today. Where are you? Like, what pieces have you put in from here into next week to really see, so that as we end our time together, that we can figure out how best to support you as you move forward from this experience. So be ready. The last section is all about that. And just, I know we've lost a lot of people, but this is our first go. Remember, you guys were our guinea pigs. So feedback, feedback, feedback. As we're moving along, if you're like, man, that was really awesome, this maybe wasn't so helpful, like, please just send me a note. You're not gonna hurt my feelings, right? It's all about hitting those marks and making sure that we're having the impact that we want, and that that we all desperately need. So we welcome that feedback, but remember, this is all driving towards that last session, which is all you. Right. Anything else? We good?
Looks like it.
My friends, feel free to ping anytime if you need anything. Some of you have done that. I try to be as responsive as possible. You have some other great people here too that you can connect to. So let's just keep the work moving, keep asking questions, and believing that this is the kind of work that's going to get us to a better place. We're going to bend the arc the right way because of what you all are doing. And thanks to everyone. Be safe, take good care.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.